So Nikki Haley had made a comment the other day about old people being in office. I want to play it for you, and then I'm going to give you my reaction. Take a look.
We seriously need to have a conversation that if you're going to have anyone above a certain age in a position of power, whether it's the House, whether it's the Senate, whether it's vice president, whether it's president, you should have some sort of cognitive test. Like, just like you have to show your tax returns, you should have some sort of health screening so that people have faith in what you're doing. And right now, let's face it, we've got a lot of people in leadership positions that are old.
So she's talking about, let's do a cognitive test for old people to determine whether or not they're still fit to perform. There's a number of issues with this. First of all, there are a lot of people who are idiots, and a lot of people who are idiots who are elected right now. There's a lot of people who might not pass a cognitive test, and it's got nothing to do with their age. Like Louis Gohmert might not pass a cognitive test. Marjorie Taylor Greene might not pass a cognitive test. It's also going to be used as a partisan weapon. You know, the Democrats were talking about partisan or a cognitive test when it came to Trump. Oh, if he doesn't pass, and we'll determine what passing means, by the way, but if he doesn't pass, he should be kicked out. So wait, throw out the votes of the people who elected this person because of some arbitrary test, which, is highly politicized. Because, look, we know the history of this stuff. We know that they used to give, tests to black people in the South to vote, and they used to make it literacy tests. They used to make it almost impossible to pass so that they could say, oh, sorry, you're not a good enough citizen, you're not educated enough, you can't vote because you failed the test. And in theory, they would just say, no, this is just a test to determine whether or not you're educated enough to participate in the democracy. So the way the idea was sold versus the way it was actually implemented was wildly different. The whole point of it was effectively racism and disenfranchisement of black people. That's the history of it. This isn't a Kyle theory. This is the history of what happened in the United States of America. And anybody knows this who's followed history even a little bit closely. So there's the idea of what a test could be. Oh, we just want to determine you're educated enough in order to function in the democracy versus the reality of what it is. By the same token, a cognitive test for people, over a certain age, I fail to see how this wouldn't be used as a weapon. You don't think the right-wingers who are calling for this would immediately try to use it on Bernie? Bernie's roughly 712 years old. I believe he started serving in the Van Buren administration. He's old as dirt. Now, Bernie also happens to be one of the best politicians we have in the country. So if you open the door and say, like, well, the test, it's a good idea because of reasons and stuff and things, that doesn't end well. Look, I feel about this in a very similar way to how I feel about term limits, okay? And actually, I think term limits are slightly less egregious, but call it what it is. A term limit seeks to solve a problem that it doesn't solve. Namely, the politicians, they didn't do a great job. Maybe if we limit how long they're there, then they'll do a better job. No, because even if, like, all the presidents in the U.S. After a certain date had term limits, that didn't make them good. Did term limits make Trump good? Did term limits make Bill Clinton good? Did term limits make Obama good? No, they were corrupt and bad within the term limit. And it's also, by definition, undemocratic, because you can have somebody with popularity to continue to win election after election. FDR won 4 elections in a row. And you say, well, no, we got to do term limits because it makes a better system and stuff. Well, but then if the people want somebody and they can't get them because of the arbitrary term limit, that does seem undemocratic now, doesn't it? So, a cognitive test, the idea of, like, we got to weed out the people who are unfit to serve. There's a lot of reasons people can be unfit to serve, and age is just one of them. Somebody can be unfit to serve because they're just not bright. But there's no way to test for that. And there's no way to say, I think that's fair and everybody thinks that's fair. No, you're going to have wild disagreement over this. It's going to become a partisan political football. But somebody can be bad in office because they're a fucking idiot. Somebody could be bad in office because they're corrupt. The corruption is something we actually can do something about, get the money out of the political system. There's a bunch of solutions that we've talked about time and time again on this show. But look, it's obvious. It goes without saying that, yeah, Biden's on the way out ski, son. He's sundowning like a motherfucker. He barely knows where he is. He's a zombie. But it's also the case, people voted for him. And you know what? If they don't like it, they're going to vote him out very shortly. That's the way it works. That's the way democracy works. It's messy. It's gross. It's ugly. It's weird. but it's the least bad of our options. I would prefer more direct democracy, so people vote a lot on the specific policies, because I think we'd have better results as a result. Of that. You get the point. But yeah, I get it. There's some old people who are kind of not with it. Chuck Grassley's barely alive. Dianne Feinstein is apparently doesn't know where she is. Maybe has the beginning stages of, dementia. That's an issue. Like, it's an issue having all. And the other thing is they don't understand technology, and they're geriatric, and so they are just incapable of dealing in the technological age in many ways. I get it. There are real problems. But this solution strikes me as less of a solution than another partisan cudgel and weapon to be deployed against whoever you don't like. So the Republicans would have used it, or will use it, against Biden, and Democrats would use it against Trump. And I don't know. I think that whenever we're discussing something that is undemocratic, tread carefully. Tread carefully. Because any sort of broad, generalized rule that is undemocratic by its nature should give you some pause, some red flags. Because you know what? Nikki Haley is a perfect example of a terrible politician. I'm not sure she's right about anything. And she's going to lecture, oh, you need a cognitive test in order to function. Joe Biden, on his worst day, is better than Nikki Haley. Joe Biden, even if he has lost his damn mind and he is a zombie, is better than Nikki Haley. Now, he's not crazy better, because Joe Biden's half a Republican. He's 50% Republican or whatever. He's terrible track record of policy decisions. But he signed an executive order to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour for federal employees and federal contractors. He got us out of Afghanistan. Nikki Haley would have done neither of those things. Those decisions are intelligent and correct 7 days of the week. And I don't care if it's being delivered by a fucking carcass. I would still support those ideas. So this idea of like, well, we got to make politics better, so now let's just kick out the old people or make them take a test or whatever. All right, then kick out the idiots and make them take a test. Kick out the corrupt, make them take a test. Actually, if you kick out the corrupt, literally almost all of the politicians would be gone. There'd be like 6 people left in the country if you got rid of the corrupt ones. So it's just you're having the wrong conversation is what it is. You want to clean up our politics. You want to make our politics better, make it much more democratic. We should have more direct democratic votes. Get rid of the corruption. Get rid of the money in politics so people actually vote based on the issues and the ideology, not based on what their donors want. That's how you do it. You want to have a conversation about, well, what these old people, they're sort of losing touch. What are we going to do? I guess we could have that conversation, but let's save it for where it belongs on the list, which is like number 147, okay? So it rubs me the wrong way when a totally corrupt, grotesque politician who's wrong about everything like Nikki Haley thinks she has some sort of solution, and it's like, let's do a cognitive test for old people. Is it something you might be able to call ageist? Maybe. I'll leave that up to you. You guys can determine it, but not so sure about the way something would be implemented like this. Because, again, there's always a difference between what it is in theory and what it would be when you empirically implement it. And it would probably be used in a horrendous way and just weaponized as, a political hatchet job across the board. And there's no way to, really objectively make the test great or fair for everybody. So that's my breakdown of it.